Our keynote speaker, Dr. Qaali, she is a double board certified trauma acute care surgeon and surgical, I can't even pronounce these words, intensivist. Wow. Excuse me. She graduated from the University of Texas with honors in human biology. She went to medical school at the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston, Texas. Dr. Hussein then went on to Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, Texas, where she completed her residency in general surgery as well as a fellowship in surgical critical care. After the completion of her training, she relocated to Florida, the first Somali person ever to go to Florida. She discovered Florida, basically, for Somalis. She moved to Florida. She'll tell us why, in a little bit. In 2015, to practice at a level 2 trauma center. She also provides trauma acute care, surgical or surgery critical care coverage for understaffed hospitals throughout the country. She's also the co-founder of Advanced Surgical Skills for Advanced Providers, a trauma and acute care surgery training course for physician assistants and nurse practitioners. That's a mouthful. So before we welcome her, she's been practicing for about 5-6 years now, and I asked her to share some facts about her. A quick fun fact, she has a hot sauce company. Just a random fun fact. So she makes some of the best hot sauces in Florida, and her company is called Lit Sauce. So without further ado, Dr. Qaali, welcome.
I've never been around this many Somali people at once.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everybody. How are you guys doing? All right. I'm going to try to get this up here. Thank you for that wonderful welcome and for that great introduction, Mukhtar. I am honored to be here this evening with you guys to celebrate the excellence that is the Somali Health Board. I'm very, very impressed. Round of applause. I've never been around this many Somali people at one time, so outside of a wedding. So I'm culture shocked, so thank you. So I'm often asked to speak about my journey of becoming a surgeon while being a Muslim woman and being a mother of 6. So while most people are fascinated by the triumphs as well as the the gore and glory of being a surgeon, can I get this up here? Okay. All right. So while most people are fascinated by being a surgeon and being a mother, I'm drawn more to talk about the pitfalls of my journey. Okay. So as surgeons, we are trained to focus our time and energy on learning from our failures and from our complications, right? Our pitfalls. And the reason we do that is because that is where the opportunity for improvement lies, right? When you look at your failures and you look at your complications, that is where you find opportunity to learn and grow. So in that token, I'd like to focus on some of the pitfalls and roadblocks along my journey. I'll touch on 3 important principles I learned the very hard way. As you'll quickly discover, a lot of the shortcomings and the pitfalls and the barriers that I talk about are social constructs, things that we've created as barriers and we're forced to accept as the norm. Okay. So my goal at the end of this talk is to encourage every single one of you guys and to challenge you to question the norm and who defines the norm. Okay? So we'll begin with a reality check. Okay? Before I delve into this principle, let me preface this by stating that if we're to make any progress in anything, radical truth is going to be a necessity, okay? And there will be some bluntness. It's an occupational hazard, okay? I'm a surgeon. I'm going to be very, very blunt, okay? So the reality is life is not fair. That's not a radical truth. It's just a fact. Simple fact, life is not fair. Okay. Everyone does not start at the same starting line. Some folks will have better opportunities than others. Some will have a helping hand along the way. while others will get doors slammed in their faces. Some will have the privilege to be themselves in every space, while others will be forced to conform to an accepted standard. This reality is not exclusive to our schools, our campuses, or the workplace. Within our own homes, communities, and in our culture, we have certain held beliefs and traditions which create roadblocks. And these are sometimes perpetuated through many generations. I don't state this to be a pessimist. Because of this reality, I almost didn't go into medical school. I was accepted to a medical school that was about an hour and a half from my parents' house. With the terrible traffic of Houston, it would mean 3 hours in one direction. That would amount to 6 hours of daily commute while in medical school. So this would be both risky and improbable. I told my parents I needed to move closer to the school. You're going to live by yourself, unwed, over my dead body, said my mom. And when she dies, over her dead body, and then over my dead body, said my dad. And when they both die, over their dead bodies, and then over my dead body, said my older sister, not wanting to feel left out. So my parents are two of the most stubborn people I have ever met. The hard work and the discipline it took for me to accomplish this goal did not change their mind about this tradition. Regardless of the opportunity, I was an unwed young lady incapable of living on her own in pursuit of a dream. But having inherited stubbornness from both of my parents, I had my own ultimatum. I handed them the manila folder that had my acceptance letter and my scholarship letter, and I said, do with it as you please. If I am not going to medical school in a safe, reasonable manner, I am going to be a couch potato. So I put on my bati. That's our muumuu, that's a Somali muumuu. And I sat on the couch. I had no plans of deviating from my original one. My mom took the folder, and an intense discussion ensued between her and my dad. It went on into the night, and it went on to the following day. The next day, manila folder in purse in hand, my mom said, in Somali, "Sobh sa jeedisay." Meaning, fine, let's go. We're gonna go look for an apartment. So these types of barriers to the pursuit of opportunities, especially for our young women, must be acknowledged. While we hold on to them as part of our tradition, they continue to limit the potential of many. We must emphasize the importance of acknowledging this reality because we are sometimes led to believe that with more success, this reality changes. It does not. When I finally went off to medical school and lived by myself, unwed, shocker, my mom would often share with me the responses of her friends as she shared some of my progress. After starting medical school, her friend said, "Dahabo," that's my mom's name, "Dahabo, who's going to marry her for you now?" They weren't too far off the mark. A suitor around the same time said, "Qaali, surgeon or not, you still walk 10 feet behind me, and only what I say goes." I graduated and got married, not to him, thank God. Then her friend said, "Dahabo, she is never going to have kids." I had my first child during my intern year, and her friend said, "Dahabo, all that money and time wasted, and now she's gonna be a stay-at-home mom." Kasaro, meaning waste. So I went back to work, and they said, "Dahabo, what kind of mother is she? What's the point of having kids if you're not gonna be there to take care of them?" I continued having kids and going back to work. I enlisted lots of help from my family, daycares, babysitters. What kind of mother and bad mother were frequently whispered around me. But when I finished and landed a great job with plenty of time to spend with my kids, The friend said, "Habariyar," meaning auntie, we are so proud of you. We knew you could do it. So, stereotypes, social expectations, stigma. How many young women are we holding back from reaching their full potential with these kinds of attitudes? How are we to fight inequality at school or at work if we're continuing to face them in our own homes and in our own communities? We start by acknowledging this reality both as individuals and as a community. We acknowledge it, but we do not accept it. What does that mean? It means that these social standards and expectations do not have to be yours. As long as you're maintaining your values and what it means to you to be authentic, you do not have to internalize others' perceptions of your abilities and your potential. I'm going to repeat that, okay? As long as you're maintaining your values and what it means to you to be authentic, you do not have to internalize others' perceptions of your abilities or your potential. So, how do you know you're maintaining your values? This is our second important principle, goal setting. As I try to be considerate of my audience, I thought this would be a better image of goals. But everyone knows goals are important, right? What's so radical about goal setting? What I've learned about goal setting is this. It's not just, I want to accomplish this. It's beyond that. When you're told certain aspects of your individuality are impediments themselves, and you're asked to compromise those values for a chance or an opportunity, it becomes extremely important for you to solidify certain things for yourself. What exactly is it that you want to accomplish? What is your why? What's driving you? What sacrifices are you willing to make? What are you willing to compromise, and what are you not willing to compromise? And finally, what are you willing to fight for? For me, what I valued most was my religion and my family. Going into medicine, I was warned very frequently that both my religion and the fact that I chose to practice the hijab and my plan of having a family were both going to be problematic. And they were problematic. I was frequently reminded of that. But because I knew this fact going in, I knew that there were certain things I could shrug off, but there were certain things I was going to fight for. My first encounter with this was when I was a third-year medical student doing my surgery rotation. We were being oriented by a surgery resident right outside of the operating room when a nurse came screaming down a long hallway. As she approached, it became clear that she was saying, "You can't be here." As she approached us, she zeroed in on me, pointed her finger and said, "You can't be here with that thing on your head." I was stunned. The surgery resident walked away and my classmates followed. Being at the lower end of the totem pole, I didn't have many options. I resisted very hard to be Somali that day because we're hotheads. But I wasn't leaving, and I wasn't taking off my hijab. So I told her, and I asked, "What will it take for me to get to the operating room?" She didn't know. This was one of the oldest medical schools in the country, and they've never had a person with a hijab in the operating room, and they had no plans for it. So I came up with a plan. I tucked my hijab under my scrubs, put on a cap to keep it in place, and she moved out of my way. They eventually incorporated this practice into their policy for future students. It wasn't enough for me to rely on the goal of wanting to be a surgeon like the rest of my classmates. I had to constantly look at the broader vision of my values and pick which battles to fight, and most of them on my own. Being bombarded with sexism, racism, religious discrimination, pregnancy discrimination, it became draining. I've learned to evaluate many of these encounters based on the overall effect on my long-term goals. Someone blocking access to my future workplace, that's a worthy fight. Lack of maternity leave policy because it's never been done before, criticisms and backlash and being called selfish. Fighting those small battles will not change anything. What's important is having policies in place to protect your rights and your job. And that's the worthy cause. Systems can change, and you can be part of that change. When long-term goals and values are clear, it becomes much easier to navigate through what can sometimes feel like a landmine. Okay, so once you've figured out your goals and your values, fought all the good fights, and finally get to your goal, how do you know you've made it? How do you know you've succeeded? Is it the first great interview? Is it after your first job? Is it after the first paycheck where all the aunties say, we're so proud of you, we knew it? This is the third principle I learned the hard way, owning your success. I found out what success meant after my first job interview as a surgeon. It was the worst interview of my professional career, and I've had many terrible ones. I was interviewing at a prestigious academic institution for which I'd been recruited. I felt I had reached my goal, all the sacrifice, the sleepless nights, the tears, missed important family events. It all culminated to this point. Then, when I least expected it, reality struck again. Following a brief discussion about my kids, the chairman interviewing me said, "You've accomplished nothing over the past 6 years." He then threw my resume across the table. That wasn't even the lowest point of the interview. He went on to state that I could never meet his high expectations. Then he said that if I were to get a job there, and that's a big if, and I did not meet his expectations, things would not end well for me there. A blatant threat right in the middle of an interview. At this point, I couldn't contain the Somaliness in me. So I leaned back in my chair, folded my arms across my chest, and was about to ask, "Did you just threaten me?" He quickly read my body language, stood up, turned his back towards me, pointed towards the door, and said, "Have a good day." As you can probably understand, I was furious. I was in utter disbelief and shock. After many, many tears and many plates of comfort food, it hit me. Something had to change. But what? I've been told at every step that what I wanted to accomplish was impossible. But when I did, the goalpost was moved. Success was redefined. What was once called impossible was now called nothing. Because I had arrived at a place I wasn't meant to be, no one was willing to give me directions. I realized that what needed to change was who defined success. After reflecting on my goals and my values, I realized that not only had I met them, I had actually surpassed them. I had 4 more kids than originally planned in that time frame, and added on a fellowship I never planned on. By my own standards, I was beyond successful. However, being in uncharted territory with no GPS meant that I had to create my own. So I decided to flip the script. I had to make my own rules. First, I would have to acknowledge and own my success. Second, I would have to articulate what I brought to the table. I had to undo how we've been conditioned to interview as trainees, always seeking to be accepted. I had to own and articulate my value as a double board certified, fellowship trained surgeon with a lot to bring to the table. And third, my values, including my faith and having a family are an integral part of who I am. I would openly discuss them at every interview. They are not baggage. And anyone who thought otherwise did not deserve to have me on their team. And so with this approach, my next set of interviews, while visibly pregnant at 8 months with baby number 6, were drastically different. I got multiple offers and was even able to negotiate for things that weren't even on the table. Once I stopped letting others define what success meant, I was able to confidently own my accomplishments and find my way. So as stated earlier, I hope you all see that many of the pitfalls and barriers I've covered are simply social constructs we've been conditioned to accept as the norm. My challenge to you all is to start asking more questions. Why are things the way they are? Who defines this norm? And if you do not fit the norm, how can you be part of the change to redefine it? While it's important to acknowledge the pitfalls and shortcomings along our journeys, it is equally as important to not forget our strengths. I cannot discount the fact that being Somali contributed greatly to my success. If it wasn't for the tradition of strong family ties, I don't think I'd be standing right here today. And my husband and I are extremely grateful for our parents, siblings, aunts, uncles, and all the cousins. However, we can and should be able to discuss the pitfalls and shortcomings of our culture and traditions while elevating and upholding its strengths. To me, this is the essence of Somali excellence: acknowledging our pain and our shortcomings, reflecting on them, and progressing towards excellence. So, by being realistic about the world you live in, setting your goals, and solidifying values you wish to uphold and are willing to fight for, and not giving others the power to define your success, you can overcome any challenge. And when we can all individually and collectively reflect on our pain, we can all continue to progress towards continued success and further Somali excellence. Thank you all. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.